It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Good morning, everybody. We really appreciate you listening. And we do this thing called the Impression of the Session every 2 years, where we try to talk to as many legislators as we can about what they thought of the session, the 92nd General Assembly in this case. Welcome back to the program. We've got State Representative Stephen Meeks. He's from District 67. Stephen, how are you, sir?
Doing well, and you, sir?
I am doing fantastic this morning. I am. So, State Representative Stephen Meeks, we're going to start generally. Representative Stephen Meeks, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, I think of the sessions that I've been through, this is just logistically has been one of the smoothest and least controversial sessions that I have been through. I will say that I think a lot of that is due not only to the leadership of the speaker, but also to the fact, and I know this might be somewhat controversial to some listeners because of the extended term limits. It used to be under the old system that we were turning over the House every 2 years, and so you were getting rid of a lot of knowledge. And because we've had the extended term limits now, lawmakers have a chance to become more knowledgeable on these issues, and so we can be a lot more efficient with our time. This session, we only met once on Friday, and that's never happened in any of the sessions that I've been to. We might have gone like January, and then we were meeting Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. In this session, except for that one time, it was just Monday through Thursday. And what that allowed was, as that gave us 3 days back in our districts to visit with folks back home. It gave us more time to study bills and to read about upcoming events. And it also saved taxpayers money because we weren't at the Capitol on those days. So we had a much more efficient session that saved money. I'll also say that with the transformation bill, that was that about 2,500 long page bill. Had it not been for that bill, we actually probably would have finished session a week sooner than we did. And so it would have been one of the shortest sessions that we'd had. So overall, I'd say it was a good session. I think we got a lot of good things accomplished for our Kansans. Obviously, there were some things that I didn't agree with that got done, and that's all part of it.
Yeah, definitely. We're talking with State Representative Stephen Meeks. On a policy front, let's specifically talk tax policy. You voted against HJR 1018 to continue a levy of the 1/2 cent sales tax that's set to expire. You also voted against SB 336 to provide additional revenue for the maintenance and repair of highways. This was a gas tax increase. And you also voted against SB 576 to reform tax laws. This was the internet sales tax. So, Stephen, those are great no votes, man. And I know my audience certainly appreciates them. But my question to you is, how did you stand up to the arguments that the leadership or establishment were making for each one of those bills as to why it needed to pass, and how did you decide to vote no on all three of those?
Well, when I was first elected, I got a real good piece of advice from somebody, and they told me if you always vote your principles, then when you go back, you'll never have trouble remembering or explaining why you voted a certain way. And, we could take each one of those in turn, but on the, 1/2 cent sales tax, I was part of the 80th General Assembly that said that was going to be a 10-year deal, and that was going to be the end of it. And the argument I made for the law was we made a promise to the citizens of the state back 8 years ago, and I personally could not renege on that promise, so that was a no vote. On the internet sales tax, I'm of the mind that, yes, it's probably a tax that does need to be paid. However, my issue with that is it should be a federal level issue and not a state level issue. The state of Arkansas has no authority to force a retailer in Idaho, Nevada, Michigan, name your state, to pay Arkansas state sales tax. Just like, the state of Idaho can't come in and make one of our vendors pay Idaho state sales tax. And so I think that should be handled on the federal level. It's interstate commerce. Clearly, it's a federal issue, and so that one should have been handled. That should be handled on the federal level. On the gas tax, I had a couple concerns with that. As we continue to go forward as a society, we're going to continue to see a larger transition towards hybrid electric vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles. And the reason why we got to the problem we're into now is because we depend so heavily on gasoline taxes for the repair and maintenance of our roads. And obviously the repair and maintenance of our roads is a huge concern. We need to keep our infrastructure up to date, keep it safe, to make sure the flow of commerce and just, driving back and forth to work every day is safe. But by the same token, if we continue to make our reliance upon the gasoline tax, it's not going to be too many years down the road we're going to be in the same issue, because cars will continue, more and more people will continue to shift more away from the gasoline over to the hybrids. Hydrogen's coming online as an alternative method. We've seen natural gas, all electric vehicles. So as these newer technologies come into place, it's going to further erode that gas tax. And so I felt that Julie Mayberry presented the bill. It was the recommendation from a Blue Ribbon Commission that came out several years ago that said that we need to start looking at bringing in taxes from automotive parts and other sources to plug that gap, not to continue to rely on gasoline, because I feel what's going to happen, it'll solve the problem short term, but eventually long term, I think we're going to be back in the same situation.
Yeah. Well, when I take all of those, we're talking with Stephen Meeks, and I can't argue with your reasoning there for voting no. I would probably add, my concern would also be is the taxpayer continuing to be asked for more and more money in these situations. Right. To build roads that we're already giving the government a lot of our money, and so I guess my fear is, and I've seen some state representatives say this, publicly, but when the 92nd General Assembly, you guys aren't passing any more laws now, and do you think? Let me ask you this: do you think the people, when it's all said and done, are going to be paying more in taxes to the government, meaning a net tax increase after this session? Because the way I look at DFNA's numbers, that appears to be the case, Stephen.
I can't argue with you. I think that's the case. We did the one large tax cut, obviously, and but yeah, I think overall you're correct. One thing that I was encouraged by, one of the constitutional amendments that I proposed, was to try to phase out the personal property tax over time. Obviously, it's not one of the three that was chosen, but I understand, talking to some committee members, it was number 2 or number 3 in popularity. So look for that to come back next session, provided I'm reelected.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I think that yes, the amount of money that the average Arkansan is going to be paying because of the 92nd General Assembly will go up versus down. Yep.
And that's and see, in that, from a fiscal standpoint, like I said, there was some good stuff that happened. Like you said, I think it's good that we had the income tax cut. But if you give some money back, eventually, but then we have these plans to raise in the future, and then you're going to be raising more than you take. Then then that's a net tax increase, and that's frustrating. And so, Stephen, I mean, that technically means that government got bigger this session, not smaller.
Right. Well, the one I guess shining light on that is government did grow. We all know government always grows, but as I understand it, the growth of government this year was below the growth of the economy. So the size of government versus the size of the economy actually shrunk slightly. We'll just say, for whatever that's worth for our listeners. But yeah, I think you're right, we did. And on top of that, the other thing that's going to be facing Arkansans is, because of the minimum wage increase, prices of goods that we buy are going to go up. So the cost of living in the state is going to go up. So Arkansans are going to get hit with a double whammy. They're going to get hit with slightly higher taxes, and they're going to get hit with a slightly higher cost of living because of the minimum wage increase.
It's just it's frustrating. Why do you think? I mean, why do you think we're in a position to where we're needing to do this? I get the Arkansas Department of Transportation. They don't think that they have enough money. Okay. I get you had the counties. You have 911 services. They say they don't have enough money. And there's all these other needs. But why don't we have the money? I mean, what's going on? Do we need to? I mean, because one of the things that I thought was frustrating in the session, just from an observing standpoint up there in the gallery, there really wasn't a conversation on cutting spending or looking at ways to save money so that we don't have to go to the people and ask for more of it.
Sure. Well, during the fall budget hearings and during the past summer, we did have some victories where we were able to cut back on the size of the appropriations. We cut close to $3 or $4 billion worth of appropriations out this last session, and we cut like 800 pages worth of regulations. Those didn't get a whole lot of news attention, but we did get those victories. And a lot of times what happens, unfortunately, with state government is we hear about the general funding or the general fund. The general fund only accounts for about 20% of all state revenue. So that's roughly $5 billion of our $25 billion budget. And the rest of the money comes in special revenue. So, for example, take the funding for the 911 system. Funding for the 911 system, under the way it used to be, you paid 65 cents. That money went directly into fund the 911 system. That's all it goes for, is to fund the 911 system. And what ended up happening is there's a shortfall there, because as we go to better technologies, obviously there's more cost involved with that. And, wages go up. There's, being a 911 operator is obviously a high-stress job. And so trying to make sure that wage is competitive. And so lo and behold, over time, obviously you get a shortfall, because that fee has not increased over time. And what's happened is obviously we're all switching to cell phones. And so counties were having to pick up the difference. And what we decided to do with the 911 fee, part of the reason why we raised it is, and I think that's the only tax increase I voted for, is because I see public safety and security as a prime function of government. And the money was either going to come from taxpayers at the county level, or it was going to come from taxpayers at the state level. And when it comes at the state level, because of the way we reorganized it, we created a 911 board, put it under the Department of Emergency Management, creating accountability across the state, creating best practices. As it stands right now, 911 systems are essentially standalone. They kind of do their own thing, and they don't always talk to each other in the most efficient manners. And so by bringing it to the state level, creating a 911 board, the hope is over time, we've got 127 911 systems in the state. We're going to reduce that number down quite a bit, create more efficiencies. So over time, try to save money while at the same time increase services. But like anything else, it takes money to do that. So the question is, are we going to tax at the county level, or are we going to tax at the state level to make sure this vital infrastructure is there? And so that one I did support, and I think that was the right move. When you go to things like roads, same situation. It's a special fund. There's no general revenue that comes out of that, and so it's strictly gas tax that goes into pay for our roads. And your listeners may or may not know, but Arkansas has the 12th highest number of highway miles in the country. We actually have more highway miles, believe it or not, than California. That was done back years ago when they converted a lot of county roads into state highways. Some practical benefits to that: by making those highway miles state highway miles, you can get economies of scale when it comes to trying to maintain it. So again, you're either paying at the county level or at the state level, and it was thought back then it was more efficient to you've got better results by doing it at the state level. So, but with cars becoming more efficient, with more hybrids coming on, again, you run into a situation the amount of money is essentially staying steady that's coming into the state, while the price of paving a mile of highway is going up.
Oh.
And so, I mean, you run into a situation at some point of, you're not going to be able to get the work done you need to get done because you simply don't have the money because of these economic drivers. And so with a lot of these things, what happens is because everything is not in one big pile of money, you have to, all this stuff gets kind of piecemealed, and that's why, we've run into these situations. The tax cut we did, that was a reduction to general revenue and reduced that pot because there was a surplus there, and so we could do it and without any problem. So that's why we don't take that surplus, and because sometimes I get that question, well, if you got $100 million surplus, why not just send it to roads instead of raising taxes? Well, that's why, because they're coming from different accounts, if you will.
I understand. Yeah, it was interesting when you have the standalone income tax cut, over the next 2 years, $95 million or so, and then you have, the next week we have the gas tax increase, which was going to bring in $95 million. And so,
right.
It seems to offset. We're talking with Stephen Meeks, and again, you voted against the gas tax, internet sales tax, and the half-cent sales tax extension. State Representative Stephen Meeks, I want to ask you one more question. Do you think that the people of Arkansas, you think they're more engaged, paying more attention to what's going on in Little Rock? For example, your microchip bill, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was a success that you had. Tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For those that don't know the background, about a year or so ago, I was reading how some folks over in Sweden were getting microchipped, and I thought that was something we need to keep an eye on because that technology is coming to the state. A few months later, I read about a company up in Wisconsin that had started microchipping their employees, and so I went to our folks and said, hey, do we have any protections in place for people who do not want this technology? They said no. So I had the bill authored, got it through the House with overwhelming support. I think the only couple no votes I had thought we needed to outlaw the technology altogether. But otherwise, had strong support. But as often the case, I had some colleagues who are lawyers or experts in employment law. They came to me with a few extra ideas. So we incorporated those into the bill to make it even better and stronger. Got it through the Senate, again, overwhelming support. And governor signed that into law, so Arkansas became the very first state to implement a law to protect employees from being microchipped. And because of that, I've actually been contacted by people from other states who are also interested in doing something similar in their state. So hopefully we've started a conversation along those lines. And, as I said before, it could be 5 years before this comes to our state, or it could be here next week. But regardless, we've laid a foundation to protect our people who decide they don't want this technology.
Yeah, there's a little confusion, though, based on the initial reports. You started getting phone calls from people thinking that you were for microchipping.
For microchipping, yeah. It's funny, people, if you ask people how many trust the news media, I think the number's like 9 or 10%, but the news media were reporting that made it sound like I was going to try to microchip everybody in the state, and, people heard that, and I got a lot of phone calls from angry people, yes.
So don't
believe everything you hear in the news media. Yeah.
Did you get chapter and verse like from the Book of Revelation?
Oh yeah. I got it was the Mark of the Beast bill.
That's fantastic.
But to answer your original question, yeah, I think because of social media, people are getting more engaged in what's going on in Little Rock. I can sit on the floor of the House and I can send out notices on Twitter live, things that were happening, and people can respond back real time. And it used to be that, once your representative was down on the floor in session, there was no way to talk to them and to express your concerns about bills or your ideas. And nowadays with modern technology, I can be sitting there and get, texts and tweets and emails and sometimes it's overwhelming, but the more people get involved in the process, I think the better it is for the state.
State Representative Stephen Meeks, thank you so much for your impression of the session. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
All righty. Have a great day. Folks, that's State Representative Stephen Meeks. Again, he voted no on the internet sales tax, voted no on the gas tax, voted no on the half-cent sales tax, which are three giant revenue producers from the people to the government. especially that half cent. If it, of course, that's going on the ballot. We have a chance to vote that one down, but still, we really appreciate